Oh, welcome today. You're joining us on our regular Sunday Dharma talk and sit. We do this every Sunday, 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. We're on Zoom, except on the third Sunday of the month. We've been doing it where we do it hybrid, where it's in person and on Zoom. We're going to be doing that for December. So that's the third Sunday of December. We will be meeting hybrid, so you can join us on Zoom or you can join us at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert in Rancho Mirage, but we are going to be putting that program after that on hold to kind of recollect and see where we want to go from there regarding in-person or Zoom meetings. More to come on that. We also are meeting on Tuesdays, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Zoom for our Meditation as Refuge group. That's Rosa Maria Segura who will be leading this next one. Wednesdays, we have Just Sit, our silent peer-led meditation. That is every Wednesday on Zoom, 5:30 p.m. to 6:15. And on Fridays, we have our loving kindness meditation, our meta group, 4:30 p.m. to 5:15 p.m. And we're also pretty excited to announce that we are having a residential retreat for the ICD community at the Damadina Retreat Center in Joshua Tree. That's going to be February 17th to 20th. That is a residential retreat, so you'll be staying overnight for a few days. And the teachers are going to be Ian, who's teaching today as well, Arena Wiseman, and Freshlev White. Please sign up. It's going to be on our website and on the email. That'd be a great way to join us in community to practice. And we're also doing on the first Saturday of every month a intro to meditation class for new beginners, old beginners. Everybody can come with a beginner's mind to just get those basics down for meditation, sitting practice, breathing, posture, and a little bit more as well. The next one is going to be on January 7th with Ian as well. With that, I'll leave you to Ian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for hosting today. And yeah, a big welcome to everyone here. Thank you for showing up. There's a lot we can do with a Sunday afternoon, and it means something when we choose to practice and reconnect and continue that ongoing exploration of what it is to be a human in this world and how we can relate to this world through our practice of Dharma, meditation, mindfulness, concentration, all the factors of the Eightfold Path that we've been looking at for the last 2 months. So, so yeah, just a big welcome. And as always, we are beginning. Adrian mentioned beginners, new beginners, old beginners. I definitely think of myself as an old beginner because every time I sit down to practice or go for a mindful walk, it's always different because the weather is different. There may be some similarities from time to time, but really, if I can keep that sense of freshness, the practice is more alive. It's more real. I'm actually responding to what's here rather than what I think is always here. So with that in mind or in heart, we'll move into a period of about half an hour of a silent practice period. And I'll offer some invitations as we move into that. And if you have your own practice, feel free to go with that. These are just meant to support. And then we'll move into silence. And then I'd like to talk about compassion today. We were working with compassion on Friday in the Metta group, and I just sort of wanted to continue with that theme because it's such an integral part of the way of awareness of the path of freedom. How do we experience compassion? How do we practice with it? How do we develop it? Because this being human thing isn't easy. It's not easy being a human. So, how do I respond to uncertainty, to suffering, to pain, to delusion? How do I respond to the conditions of being human with compassion? And what does that mean? So, that's what we'll look at. But first, why don't we move into a practice period? And just inviting yourself into a comfortable posture, whatever it might be. Many of us prefer a seated posture. That may be good for you, or maybe more accessible to lie down or recline. If you're feeling really sleepy, there's always the invitation to stand if that's comfortable for you. But just finding a posture that is kind and caring of your body in this moment. And then just taking some deep breaths if that's comfortable for you. Really filling the lungs and the belly with air. Letting out some long exhales if you like. And on the exhales, just noticing if there's anything that it's possible to let go of, any tension or holding in the body that can just be invited to release by becoming aware of it, not forcing, but just noticing. Oh, I can relax my shoulders. I can let the belly soften. I can loosen the jaw, relax the forehead. I can invite myself into this practice period with kindness. And also noticing the invitation of the earth holding this body, supporting this body. Maybe checking into the places where body is held by earth or chair or bed or couch. That sense of resting, resting in gravity. Held by the earth. Made of earth. And then for the practice period, seeing how you might like to have it go today. Maybe you'd like to rest with the sensations of breathing, really noticing the movement of breath through your body, perhaps noticing at one place in the body, like the movement of air through the nostrils, or maybe noticing the whole cycle of breath. Nostrils and throat and lungs and belly. But letting the anchor be this moment, this body. What am I experiencing? So you can stay with the breath, or if you prefer, opening to sound in the room, sounds in the body, staying with and noticing the changing field of sound. Or you might simply like to rest with the touch sensations, the feeling of hand touching hand or foot touching earth. Whatever you choose as an anchor, knowing that you can come back to that at any time. It's a place where attention, awareness can gather and collect a through line, refuge. So I'll ring the bell one time to signal the start of our practice period, and three times at the end.
Yeah, it's in.
And if you and as we move into this, I'll offer this verse by Sylvia Boorstein. May I meet this moment fully. May I meet it as a friend. And perhaps noticing where attention is now. And if it's wandered a bit, not a problem. Just seeing if you'd like to invite it back to your anchor. Every moment that we come back is a moment of mindfulness, a moment of awakeness. and noticing where attention is now. And again, if it's wandered somewhere, just inviting it back and noticing the difference in the quality of mind between wandering and present. Thank you for your practice. And why don't we take maybe a 2-minute stretch movement break before the talk? So just I'll ring a bell in about 2 minutes or 3 minutes and let us know to come back. Okay? So, welcome. And if you joined us during the meditation, another welcome. Thanks for coming and being here tonight in sangha, in practice community, whether Zoom or in person. There's something very powerful about being with others who want to practice, who see the value in that, who see the importance of it. So I mentioned before we went into the silent practice period that I wanted to talk about compassion tonight, which we've been practicing with the Friday Metta group. And one analogy I like is that it's said that if you imagine awakening or liberation as a bird, that it flies with one wing of wisdom and one wing of compassion, and that it's these two wings working together that truly lifts us up, that truly frees. And that without compassion, wisdom isn't full, that it's missing something essential, something connecting. And without wisdom, compassion might become somewhat diffuse or overwhelmed. And so these two energies together strengthen each other. So the deeper our wisdom, the more compassionate that we become. So in the ancient Buddhist teachings, there are two kinds of wisdom that are talked about. One is penetrating wisdom that sees clearly. And then there's vast wisdom, which is wisdom that's infused with compassion and the intentions, the values of kindness and love and letting go, those aspects of wise intention that we looked at on the Eightfold Path over the last 2 months. And life has a way of stretching our capacity for compassion. You know, there's so much that pulls our hearts. Compassion for people in war zones, for people experiencing illness, deprivation, abuse at the hands of those who should be caring for them. Compassion for imprisoned people, enslaved people. Compassion for people who are targeted and murdered because of ignorance and hatred. Compassion for animal beings. Compassion for those most acutely feeling the effects of climate change. And compassion for ourselves as we may be in some of those groups, but also compassion for ourselves as we navigate this uncertain world and all of the various forms of suffering in it, with these human hearts and these fragile and temporary bodies. And it's said that the Buddha himself taught because of compassion, that when he experienced his awakening, he thought it would be too difficult and troublesome to teach to other people because it was subtle and difficult to understand. And that he changed his mind. He was prevailed upon by a divine being who said, you know, you have to do this. And the Buddha realized, yes, I do have to do this. This is worth sharing. Even if I reach just a few, it's worth it. It's worth offering this. So it was his compassion that led him to offer what he knew to benefit others. So in the early Buddhist teachings, compassion is considered one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, and I I love that word. It's a beautiful word. Brahma was the great god of Vedic theology, and Vihara means dwelling place. So Brahma Vihara is literally the place maybe where God dwells, or you might say the realm of the divine, or the heavenly abodes sometimes. And the Buddha actually liked to use language and terms of his culture in new and different ways. So it's, to me, it's like he said, so do you really want to know where the gods dwell? Is that what you're interested in? If that's what you're interested in, they live in a heart that's free and boundless. That's where the gods really live, not some amazing heaven, but that heaven that can be in your heart. And so there are four aspects of this realm: metta or loving kindness, karuna or compassion, which we'll talk about today, mudita or appreciative joy, and upekkha or equanimity. So metta is the energy of love, kindness, friendliness. You can envision it like the sun shining at noon on everything that is, without exception, without preference, offering all beings its light and warmth. And then when this kind of love, that kind of beautiful, strong, boundless love, encounters suffering, it takes the form of karuna, which we translate as compassion, which is the pure wish that suffering might end. So if metta is like the sun at noon, it's said that karuna or compassion is like the sun at sunset. So darkness is close, palpably close, but the sun keeps shining and shines all the more brightly, coloring the sky with light and warmth. Similarly, how when we're face to face with suffering and affliction, that the mental attitude of compassion shines more brightly. It flares, it quickens. So it's that light that keeps shining no matter what it encounters. And it's something that we can choose and develop, just as we can choose to look, to connect, to understand the other. Compassion is a response to life that we actually can train and encourage and strengthen. All of the Buddha's teachings are this way. They're all invitations to practice, not simply to know, but to do, to see for ourselves. How does my experience change when I practice compassion? When I pay attention without judgment? Is that a condition for compassion? From the difficult person at work, or an argument with our partner, or that difficult internal voice of shame, judgment, and self-reproach, all the way to a single fly. When we pay attention without judgment, something happens. So I was up at Dhammadena for the queer retreat, as some folks here were too, and we were all very aware of the flies everywhere. And and this actually didn't happen at this particular retreat, but I think it happened the last time I was on land there, so like 2019. And just to say, I don't think there will be any flies in February. I think they go dormant, but they are around in October. And so anyway, so I was writing, and I was writing a Dharma talk or something, and I was waving these flies off me, like, just get away, leave me alone. I didn't want to hurt them. I just wanted them to get lost, and let me do what I wanted to do. And I had made a cup of tea, and that I left to steep for a few minutes. And so I got up and I went into the other room and I got it. It was a cold day, warm tea. Okay, this will be nice. And then I looked into the cup and there was a fly, either dead or almost dead, floating on the top. Because of course there was. Yuck. So I fished it out with my finger And it wasn't dead because it just kind of clung to me, clung to my finger, like it was in shock. And so I just, let it stay there. And I just watched and just paid attention to it without aversion at this point, just interest, presence, one living being observing another, being present for another. And so, yeah, I just marveled at this amazing little being who, like all beings, just wanted to live with ease. And so, I watched over minutes as it began to move and then carefully dried itself off, groomed every part of its body, and then, started moving a little bit more. And then eventually it just flew off. Cool. So then a few minutes later, I'm back at my desk and the next fly comes buzzing around my head. And instead of like aversion, I'm like, oh, sweetie, how nice of you to come by. A totally different feeling. The pest becoming the beloved, through this simple development of some compassion, through paying attention, recognizing our common beingness. Now, I do have a tolerance limit and I would start putting them outside, but that moment of like, oh, it's another one, or maybe it's the same one. How sweet, how wonderful this being is. So Tara Brach says when we wholeheartedly attend to the person we're with, to the tree in our front yard, or to a squirrel perched on a branch, this living energy becomes an intimate part of who we are. And then she quotes J. Krishnamurti, to pay attention means we care, which means we really love. And that's sometimes said, and I think it's a very interesting place to reflect. Attention is a very basic form of love, or at least it underlies love. So I wonder if you've noticed if that's true for you. Paying deep attention with kindness, I think, is love. When we're really open to what's here, our relationship to it changes. Paying attention with a heart that inclines toward love naturally moves us in that direction of compassion. No matter who or what it is, if we really pay attention, we can feel compassion. In that stillness of awareness, of simple awareness with kindness, we are the same. All of life cares. It's impossible to be alive and to not care. When I take the time to simply observe another being, I see so clearly that just like me, they have their joys, their desires, their delusions, their vendettas, their places of comfort, their tendencies. Just like me, they want to live without suffering. And just like me, they don't always know the way to do that. And when I see that, whether it's an animal or another human being, how does that feel? When I know deeply through attention and presence that, yes, just like me, they too suffer and they feel uncertainty and anger and joy, and that they too, especially this, are a vulnerable being in a vulnerable body trying to get through life. How does that feel? How does that shift my relationship? So this is why we practice, and I think to learn compassion, to live with less suffering, and to relate to the suffering that's in the world with more skill and more care. So where does this come from? How does it arise? Or maybe better, I think, how do we uncover our inborn heart of compassion? So we just saw one way it can arise through attention. And I believe that our original heart, our child heart, is full of this energy. and that it gradually gets covered and muted as we grow up in culture and families maybe that are motivated by greed and competition, a culture that values what we can get rather than what we can give, that thinks that happiness is limited and a scarce resource and that it's tightly related to material conditions and what we have and own and control rather than what we know and what we give and what is alive in our hearts. And we may have grown up in families or settings that don't know how to hold and nurture a tender heart. You know, how many of us heard "you're too sensitive" at some point in our childhoods, as though sensitivity was something undesirable, unrealistic, unsafe, rather than something actually beautiful, something to be celebrated and supported in skillful ways. But the good news is that that child heart is never really lost and that we can access and develop it again. And as adults, we can nurture it, protect it with all the equanimity and wisdom that come with experience and practice. So one way that we can do this is through the lens and pathway of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha's first and foundational teaching. Because what we've really been talking about so far is really the First Noble Truth, the universality of difficulty, of suffering, of unease, dukkha, this fundamental understanding that all lives will contain difficulty, loss, dissatisfaction, that this is part of what it is to be human, and this isn't due to us being wrong or imperfect or, bad in some way. It's just inherent in having an embodied life. So there's compassion right there in that knowledge. We're just human. Just as I struggle and suffer pain and regret and all the rest of it, so do all beings. Really seeing this deeply awakens the heart. Into each life some rain must fall, or a lot of rain. And then the clouds that cause this rain are the clouds of greed, the storm clouds of aversion, the mists of delusion. And so this is the second noble truth, the three poisons, the sources that cause craving, the clinging and the pushing away that we do of life. And that this too is universal. All beings except a fully enlightened being experience greed, aversion, delusion. And then there's that third noble truth, that there is the possibility of relating differently to what's here. And in that, there's the possibility of freedom, of release. And so, wow, the things that all beings want more than anything else, freedom, safety, ease, are possible to experience. So we can develop our minds and hearts, we can incline toward kindness, care, and joy and stability. And the way to do this is through the practice and application of the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Path, which we spent the last 2 months with. So wise view, wise intention, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, wise effort, wise mindfulness, wise concentration. And this basis informs how we relate, particularly around the ethics of wise speech, wise action, and livelihood. So remembering those two wings, wisdom and compassion, we develop or uncover our heart's natural inclination toward caring. And then we express that in the actions of the body, the actions of the mind, the actions of the heart, through the practice of the Eightfold Path. Specifically, how we are in relationship, wise speech, speaking what is true, kind, connecting, useful. Wise action, refraining from any action that harms self or other, and we looked into that in detail. But also, wise action includes acting in ways that are beneficial to others, that are caring of others, respectful of others, supportive of others. And then wise livelihood, not exploiting other beings for our benefit, or perhaps even working in ways that support and uplift other beings. So one of my favorite teachings from the old texts is, I cannot provide for the welfare and happiness of others merely by wishing it. Let me put forth effort to accomplish it. So we do wish, and the wishing is what juices the effort. So it can seem like too much sometimes as we open our hearts to what's here. There is a lot of dukkha in the world, and sometimes it can be like, whose idea was this to set it up this way? You know, who thought of this? So the Buddha thankfully didn't encourage that kind of questioning. It was more like, let's actually look at what we've got clearly, and then consider how we might relate to it, and then do that, try it out, see if it works. So the Buddha was much more interested in not how we got here, who made the universe, but how we hold what's here. What do I do with this heart that breaks again and again and again for the world? How can I maintain a compassionate heart in a world so in need and also seeming so broken? You know, and every time I go to a news source, I see more pain and confusion and conflict and people being targeted because of the color of their skin or sex or gender identity or the amount of money that they have or who their parents were or their physical abilities or what culture they grew up in or what religion they practice. And it's a lot. And sometimes as a support for me, I like to think of some of the archetypes of compassion in the different lineages of Buddhism. And I just want to show some of them on the screen because it can be so helpful to have visual representations too of compassion. So I'm going to share a screen and just show you 5 images. So first, this is Avalokiteshvara, who is the Tibetan Bodhisattva of compassion. And you see the 1,000 arms, each with an eye. So this is the compassionate being knowing what is needed for each person, for each situation. And you see all the tools around them. And then this is Kuan Yin. So this is the female representation of Avalokiteshvara in another culture, particularly in China and Japan. And you see her with her knee up and her hand outstretched. She is ready to take action in the world. So compassion, willing to be expressed and ready to be expressed in action. And this is a modern image of Kuan Yin by an artist named Amy Wilson. This is another image of Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig, without the arms, but just as caring. And then this is Green Tara. And like Kuan Yin, Green Tara, you can see, has her foot forward. So she is ready to step from the place of practice, this lotus, into the world, to do what needs to be done because of her great caring. Kuan Yin, it said, is she who hears the cries of the world. But she who hears the cries of the world is not the same as she who cries for the world. And I've been reflecting on that the archetypes of compassion are rarely depicted as weeping. To hold distress is not the same as to be distressed. Great tears may lead to great empathy and feeling, but compassion itself is concerned with alleviating, with wishing and acting for the removal of suffering. Wise intention and wise action. So that karuna, that compassion that we're inviting in with vast wisdom, compassion held and balanced by equanimity, by that deep knowing of the First Noble Truth. So that understanding of the First Noble Truth is what gives the compassionate heart equanimity so that it can meet the difficulties without becoming overbalanced, without losing that intention, that beautiful intention of alleviating suffering. It's sometimes said that compassion is suffering with, but it isn't that, at least in the Buddhist teachings. It's the quickening of the heart in the face of pain. When we see a child crying or we see an animal caught in a trap, the compassion is right there. It's immediate. Here's suffering. What can I do in this moment? How can I act to alleviate this pain? Take some practice to bring that kind of compassion toward more difficult people and situations. But I think it's interesting, to reflect on that question. Is compassion distressed? I think in that moment, like where you see the child crying or the animal trapped, distress isn't there, just that desire to help in this moment. And then the question for me is, do I add to my distress by practicing compassion, or do I actually alleviate it? So by going toward what's difficult, do I make it harder for myself, or do I maybe in some way actually make it easier for myself? If I'm struggling with that First Noble Truth, if I can't forgive that there is suffering in the world, then my practice of compassion may be really exhausting. But there is a strength here that we can invoke, defiant care, defiant compassion, that I am going to be caring no matter what. We look at our heroes, people like Nelson Mandela or Malala or Thich Nhat Hanh or John Lewis. They didn't stop. They keep going. So just as metta allows me, they go and they do it defiantly, gently defiantly, but defiantly too. Just as metta allows me to bring more of the love that I want to see in the world, so the practice of compassion allows me to bring more of the bodhisattva energy into the world, more of that energy of Kuan Yin, Green Tara, Chenrezig. So that vast wisdom, the deep caring that comes from knowing suffering, and the strong intention not to add to that in any way and to alleviate it as much as possible. When we really know suffering, when we have shed those tears, how many times is our natural response that I never want to do that to anyone. I never want anyone to feel that. And I aspire not to add more suffering to this world. Jokai last week brought in the Bodhisattva vow, or one of them, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. I really hear the defiance in that. I don't care how many there are. I'm going to save them, or at least I'm going to try. And I'm not going to be afraid to let that live in my heart. So in that way, the practice of compassion is always appropriate, and we have infinite opportunities to practice, reminding ourselves again and again that common suffering, our common experience of dukkha, or a likeness in that way. And we can do this anytime, anywhere. The stakes don't always have to be high. We don't always have to practice with people that we find really difficult or challenging. We can keep that flame of compassion alive as we move through our day, kind of like a pilot light on an old stove. When I'm in the grocery store waiting in line, instead of just being aware of other people behind me or in front of me or the cashier as just people, I can actually spend a few moments to recognize that this person right here, standing right next to me, endures the 10,000 joys and sorrows that I do. Just like me, this person has had times of being deeply misunderstood, has lost a loved one, has felt vulnerable and confused, has been alone and felt alone. Just like me, they want relief from the pain, from the suffering. Just like me, they want to live with as much freedom as possible. And when I do that, a stranger becomes part of my human family, part of my heart, because I now see them as worthy and deserving of my care and concern. And in that moment of blessing, I am blessed also, because I'm just that much more connected and open to our shared humanness. I'm that much less cut off. And I find that that kind of practice is not fatiguing. But what about the deluge of pain and suffering that we become aware of, that we swim in? What about the things that are so big and pervasive? Racism and climate destruction and the ignorance and corruption of leadership. Pema Chodron sometimes speaks of the rawness of a broken heart. And she writes, sometimes this broken heart gives birth to anxiety and panic, sometimes to anger, resentment, and blame. But under the hardness of that armor, there is the tenderness of genuine sadness. This is our linking with all those who have ever loved. This genuine heart of sadness can teach us great compassion. So when we're in that place, that heart of sadness can be a teacher. It can engender, inspire compassion. So deeply understanding this nature of suffering, our heart opens to the cries of the world. And so it's natural, it's okay to feel that sadness, to allow it to motivate. And in that practice, there's the pure motivation to end suffering, along with the wish and the certainty that it can end, that third noble truth again. So we can wish and act, body, mind, and heart, to remove suffering or lessen it however we can. And as we do that, can we have compassion first with ourselves? Can we remember this one right here? A dear friend once offered me the advice, give from your overflow. And the traditional practices of metta and compassion begin with ourselves and then radiate ever outward to more and more beings. But we start right here with this one. Never leave yourself out of your compassion practice. And if it's particularly hard or you're inundated or flooded and it's not accessible right now to hear the cries of the world without crying yourself, it's okay. That's a, oh, dear one moment. Let me be here for you. Let me accompany you. Let me resource and strengthen you. Sometimes it's said that just listening is healing. Allowing truth to be present is its own healing. And this is the deep listening of Kuan Yin, of Tara, of all the Buddhas, hearing the cries of the world. So I want to close with words from Henri Nouwen, a Dutch priest and social activist of the last century. He says, when we honestly ask ourselves which person in our lives means the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a warm and tender hand. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our lives. That is a friend who cares. That is the compassion of listening. So let's take just a moment and then we'll open the floor, but maybe just take a moment to let the words wash over and through. Okay, so thank you. And yeah, this is one of these topics that I think a lot of us have experience and feelings about. And I'd love to open the floor and just hear maybe how you work with compassion, or how you understand it, or anything that you'd like to share or ask. And if you'd like to raise your hand, if you know how to do that electronically or or just physically, if that works better for you. So why don't we actually close with a short meditation, just by way of a dedication of merit and also just offering of compassion and care to this world and to all of us in this world, making our way through as vulnerable beings and yet also able to practice, able to bring wisdom, and that vast wisdom, the wisdom that is informed by compassion and caring, into our experience more and more. So I want to share maybe a little bit from the practice that we did on Friday. And so just inviting you to bring to mind an image of an archetype, maybe one of the ones that we looked at on screen, or a person or other being that embodies compassion and kindness for you. That vast heart of wisdom and acceptance. And so it might be a parent or a grandparent, Kuan Yin or Avalokiteshvara or Green Tara or any other being that comes to mind. And just welcoming their energy into your heart space. And feel what it's like to be in the presence of this being, to be with this ideal, this strong heart. Maybe there are visual images or sounds or a felt sense of being with this one. And knowing that this being wishes only peace and ease. And so resting into that sense of being seen and accompanied. And if there's something that you are struggling with right now, something that's causing pain or sorrow, sharing that with this being. And if the sense of a divine being doesn't work for you, then sharing with your deepest heart, the wisdom heart within each of us. Maybe in a simple sentence, or maybe an image, or maybe just a felt sense. This is what I'm dealing with right now. And then knowing that you're heard, that this being or this part of you completely accepts and recognizes what you're feeling. Listening completely, listening deeply from a place of vast wisdom, a place of love, with no attempt to talk you out of how you're feeling or rationalize or minimize, just listening and presence. And then if you like, imagining the kindness and compassion of this being reaching out toward you and offering you these wishes. May you always be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May you be at peace. May you always be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May you be at peace. And then joining your heart with this being, adding your own compassion and care to theirs, and looking out upon the world so in need of healing, so in need of care, and offering these wishes to all beings. May you always be held in compassion. May your pain and sorrow be eased. May you be at peace. May all beings be given what they need to be free. May all beings be free from sorrow and pain. May all beings know freedom. May all beings be held in our compassion. May all beings be at ease. Thank you for your practice and your caring, and may we all be well and bring our compassion into the world. And Tuesday, Rosa Maria will be with us, so please come if you'd like to, and hope to practice with you again soon.